Hello, everyone.
Good
Sarah, you
morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to today's webinar presented by UASI. My name is Sarah, and I'm the Marketing Coordinator at UASI. Today's presentation is titled The CDI Audit, Understanding the Keys to a Successful Process. During the webinar, you can submit questions through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to submit technical or content-related questions. If I can answer your question, I will. Otherwise, I will defer it to our presenter, Staci, and she will answer it during our Q&A period, or she will follow up with you via email if we run out of time. And tomorrow, you'll receive an email with the slides from today's presentation, as well as a certificate of attendance. The following information is UASI's opinion based on broad industry knowledge and experience. These opinions may vary depending on size and needs of the organization. I'm proud to introduce today's speaker. Staci Josten has over 30 years of nursing and healthcare experience, with the most recent 12 years focused on clinical documentation improvement. At UASI, Staci is responsible for all CDI and UR initiatives, providing consulting and staffing services to healthcare organizations across the country, including inpatient and outpatient CDI staffing support, CDI quality review and auditing, inpatient and outpatient CDI program assessments, and interim management. So with that, Staci, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. I just wanted to say hi to everyone and welcome to our CDI management series about CDI audits. I'm so glad you joined, and thank you for your time today. I hope everyone's staying healthy and well. And with that, we'll get started. And I'll turn off the video. We don't need to see me the whole time. So here's a picture. And this is where I'd like for all of you to think back to the first time you had one of your cases reviewed by someone else. This picture here represents on how I felt, and I wonder if any of you can relate. My background, like Sarah said, is in nursing, and I transitioned to CDI around 2007. My director at the time would hand out to our team a list of medical record numbers of patients for us to review prior to an upcoming internal audit meeting. There were 8 of us on our team, and we had a week to review these cases, deciding what DRG should be there, secondary diagnoses, what should be queried, or if a query was left, if it was appropriate and compliant. Sounds innocent enough, right? However, she would preface the list by saying she felt these were cases that were done wrong and wanted everyone to review them to see what was done wrong. So the first thing I would do when I got that list was look through them frantically and pray none of them were my cases. I don't think anyone likes to be told in front of a group that you did something wrong. Then if I did see an MRN number of one of my cases, that's when the sweating would begin. Because then on meeting day, we all sat around this big table in a conference room, and the director and some self-claimed 2 senior CDI experts in our group would dominate that meeting. These 2 senior CDSs, I think, really enjoyed this meeting. Maybe you know the type, always right, never wrong. And I think they really enjoyed making others feel bad. I kind of get nervous and uptight actually thinking about back then sitting in those rooms. But that was 13 years ago, and that was my first experience of a CDI audit. Now, a decade later, I have much thicker skin. I think leadership positions do that to us, right? But if I could go back, I would have suggested to my boss and ask her, perhaps we could make this more of a safe and learning experience. Perhaps pull each person in personally, talk about the case, and then ask them if they would feel comfortable sharing what they learned with the team so others could learn, instead of all of us worrying and almost in tears as people were picking apart our thought process. But there is always something to learn, and healthcare is always changing. Last year, this time, we had never heard of COVID-19, and now we're all pseudo experts in the topic, right? I believe auditing is necessary for all CDI programs. However, to be successful, it needs to be set up well, and hopefully by the end of today's presentation, you will all learn several keys that you can help implement or enhance in your CDI programs to have a successful CDI audit process. At the end of our time together, I hope each of you will have achieved these three outcomes. You will be able to describe the keys to a successful audit. And I bet most of you already know this one, but we'll review the value of performing CDI audits. And then we'll spend a lot of time talking about the process of audits, as well as reviewing some audit outcomes and how to utilize that data. Before we start that, I just kind of want to know the audience. So Sarah's going to pop up a polling question. It says, does your CDI program currently perform CDI audits on the CDI staff? And one is yes, one of our CDI audits, one of our leaders perform the CDI audits, or an outside vendor performs the routine audits, or you do peer-to-peer CDI audits, or at this time you don't perform audits, or maybe there's another option that I'm not aware of. So if everyone could please take a few moments and answer those questions, I'd really be, it'll be helpful for me just to kind of gauge the audience. And we'll just give this just about 30 seconds to answer. Sarah, I can't see the results coming in.
They will pop up in one moment when I answer
Okay.
it. Hold on
All
one
right.
second.
Thank you. Sometimes I see that as it's going, as the questions are answering, but I didn't see that this time. Okay, great. So thank you very much for answering the question. It looks like 55% of the listeners, in typically, just so everyone understands our audience, we really promote this with CDI management in mind. So most of you on the call are leaders. So thank you for attending for that and providing your insight. So 55%, you do it internally, 8% outside, 8% peer, and 23% do not perform audits. So I'm really, and 5% others. So that's interesting. And I am hopefully that this will really be helpful for those of you that have not performed audits, and those that you that are, you'll learn some tips and keys to help improve that process. So keys to successful CDI audit process. I kind of have, for those of you that know me personally, I have kind of a busy mind, so I need a process to work through anything complex or with something that has a lot of moving parts. So today, really wanted to narrow it down to 5 basic steps and really keys to that CDI audit process. And we'll spend time with each of these 5 keys, but planning and preparing, getting ready for the audit, communicating to your CDI team and to the auditors, spending time on the analysis of the results, providing feedback both individually and to the teams, and then to deliver education when you find those patterns of knowledge gaps in education. So let's start with the first one, planning and preparing. If you've attended a presentation of mine before, you know I love quotes, love to read, find interesting things to help develop myself and others as leaders. And a favorite of mine is from Alexander Graham Bell, and it's before anything else, preparation is the key to success. As you prepare or start to organize an audit, here's some important questions for you to answer to get the audit set up. The why, who, when, what, and how. So prepare, you'll want to know these answers. Why perform a CDI audit on your team? Who's going to complete that audit? When is the best time to complete an audit? What is reviewed in that process? And how are records selected? And how many reviews per CDS? Let's talk through some possible answers to these questions. Why perform a CDI audit on your team? You got to know your why of the CDI audit. There's all kinds of books about knowing your why. And another quote for you is, when you know your why, you will know your way. And if you are as a leader, you don't know your why, then the staff won't either. And there's many whys to complete a CDI audit, but I listed probably the top 8 here. You want to advance your CDI program to the next level. You know there's some educational needs, and this will help assist in outlining those CDI staff educational needs. We can't follow everyone all day, every day, so an audit can help confirm CDI processes are being followed. You want to evaluate compliance with standard query language. We don't want to have any leading queries out there. We want to identify CDI program opportunities. Maybe you're a new Vizient shop, or you want to see if there's some HCC initiatives being implemented in your hospital. You want to see if your CDI program can help there and if there's opportunity. So there's always new opportunities for CDI programs to expand. Perhaps you want to validate that the documentation of care and treatment is accurately reflected in the signed DRG. Maybe there's a big denial problem at your hospital, or an ongoing, maybe in your PEPR reports, you see some issues. And so you want to look at some specific DRGs to help improve that area. Sometimes we need to assess the quality of our CDI specialist. Maybe you have a team of really new CDSs and you want to make sure they're progressing and learning. And lastly, but not least, you want to identify potential shifts for ROM and SOI. I love that many CDI programs are reviewing for quality. That's been a big change over the years. When I first started doing CDI, it was just looking for those CCs and MCCs, and now we're expanding. But you want to make sure that your team is capturing these diagnoses. So it might be another opportunity on why performing a CDI. This, of course, is not an all-inclusive list, but it'll give you some main reasons on why you should do CDI audits for your program. The next question to answer when you're planning and preparing is the who will complete the audit. We talked a little bit about that with the question. The poll is, do you do it internally? Do you do it externally? And this can be really tricky. Before the UASI CDI leadership team got into consulting at UASI, we're all directors and managers of CDI programs like all of you. So we got together and listed some of the pros and cons we considered when we were trying to decide if we should do it internally or externally. There's definitely some pros for keeping it internally. The auditor will be part of the CDI team, which can give some insider knowledge of team members. They know their strengths as well as their weaknesses. They are likely familiar with facility policies, specific, like if you have guidelines on when you can query for acute blood loss anemia, those type of things. But of course, that comes with some cons as well, such things as they may not be objective. Excuse me, perhaps the auditor doesn't want to give their buddy an opportunity for improvement, or conversely, they have a foe on the team and become real nitpicky on those people. And audits are sometimes hard to make a priority internally, depending on the auditor's workload, especially if the auditor is assigned to a leadership position as well. Many days we spend putting out fires, and then audits can be put on a back burner. It does and can cause hard feelings among team members. As back to my story, I'm still uptight about some of that feedback that I received from my peers, and don't know what they don't know. It's easy to know only what's inside your four walls of your organization, but perhaps other opportunities exist an internal person may not realize. So then there's the flip side of the coin is maybe you want to consider doing an outside third-party vendor like UASI. And so the person can be objective, that third person. There's no close relationship with anyone on the team. Experience from other organizations and can provide some insights on what has worked well with other CDI teams across the country and what maybe hasn't worked as well. It's always nice to have a fresh pair of eyes on your records, and you should expect from a vendor to be aware of code updates and the latest and greatest processes so that they can help your organization achieve that as well. And of course, there's always cons with this. Number one being there's a cost, right? And you want to make sure that the vendor does know your internal policies, because you don't want to have the vendor review something and it's not a guideline that you do at your hospital. So I did want to give a little quick shout out to our CDI quality review program or audit within UASI. And if any of you have, want to discuss this with me, just shoot me an email. I love talking about that because I'm very proud of the product we produce for our clients that we partner with across the country. And we really try and make it a positive experience for both the CDI staff and the leadership. And it comes from a place of learning and making us all better. Our approach really is from a leadership team is we were all there, been there, done that, and we want to make it so it's really a learning experience. And here's just a real quick summary of an example of 4,400 health records from several clients where we focused the audit to look just for DRG changes. And in that, we found an average of 263 additional potential reimbursement per record, which paid for that external audit and then some, because then the education provided after helped capture those topics in the future as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you'd like to just have a discussion or even brainstorm about your current process. I love talking about that kind of stuff. So, continuing with planning and preparing, answered our why, we answered our who. So now we're going to talk about when, and this one was really pretty easy. It's just some things to consider. Most time, there's really not a bad time, but as a leader, you want to consider, make sure that you're going to have time on your plate for evaluation and action on the results. You don't want to have this big, beautiful report, or your auditor spend a ton of time preparing it, and then you have too much on your plate and you can't do anything with it. And then you want to consider, when was the last time. You want to make sure that they're ongoing. You don't want a whole big long time to pass. And we'll talk about a little bit more about the when, with how often type of thing. But then, avoid those times if you're being upcoming big project like IT conversion or process changes. And then when selecting records, you want to avoid holidays or high PTO time, so that you can make sure you get records from all of your CDSs when you're providing those record reviews. So what is reviewed in the audit? The what is reviewed is a very important piece in the planning and preparing process. And I like to think that CDI audits can cover four general areas: process, general understanding, clinical concepts, and query compliance. And I just listed a few examples under each of them. But if the process type audit is validating the staff are following processes and procedures, like timing of initial reviews, subsequent reviews are following your policy, and then if you do reconciliation, that's done accurately. If you were able to listen to UASI CDI Management Series last month, we did a session on CDI metrics, and we really discussed the importance of that reconciliation process. It's posted on our UASI website under CDI Insights, so check that out there. You can get that presentation if you didn't get a chance to attend. The general understanding ones is depending on the focus of your program, but you may want to see if the CDS is in the general ballpark for the right DRG. They get the main part of their jobs, like that their final DRG is, close to matching the CDI, the coders. I personally don't think that, we have coders in place that do a beautiful job and that's their lane. I don't think CDI has to match up 100%, but you want to make sure that they kind of get that same concept or that understanding of where the DRG should be. Or maybe your team hasn't done placed DRGs on the records before, potential ones. And so there might be an audit so that they can help learn to do that. Clinical concepts is probably the biggest area, and this is where you want your CDI to keep advancing their skills. Things change every year, and you want to make sure your staff are not missing things that are important to your program. And maybe you're expanding to different areas. And then lastly, and probably the most important, is you want to make sure that the queries that are placed, that they're compliant and that they're valid. Nothing makes us more nervous than seeing those queries that aren't compliant. So I wanted to share just a quick little tool. If you're like me, I want to cover all of the areas. We use this example, this tool that we can, and we, review a record and we look at if the CDS, when was their initial review, what was their date of their subsequent reviews, and were they done within the guidelines that we had established for that client. Then we want to look at their CDI overall understanding. Was their working DRG, valid? Was it in the right ballpark? How did it compare to the coder's final DRG? Query compliance, we look at how many were left for this. How many did they leave for this time, and was that valid? Meaning, we want to make sure that there's no over querying happening. And was it compliant? Not leading, not underlining, not bolding, those type of things. And then CDI concepts, was there any missed query opportunities? Was there, some areas that we want to make sure that they're capturing? And then what was that topic? I like that because, we want to then that gives us an idea of where that education can be. And then we always want to put that location, the information, so that when we do provide this back to our CDSs, that they know where to look at so that they don't have to, it just helps make it more of an efficient process. And then again, at the processes, if you do a reconciliation process, was that completed accurately? Especially if you are doing financial impact, it's really key that that is done accurately to represent your number. So that's just an example of a tool that you could use. The last planning and preparation question is how. And that's probably one of the most discussed questions there. How are records selected and how many records per CDS? We do our audits at UASI client specific based on their needs, but some general suggestions, if asked, are included like I always want to narrow down the criteria and random but targeted. It kind of seems like you're saying this, opposite things, but it's funny to state, but I like to narrow down the selection, but then randomly select from that narrowed down selection. So it's somewhat targeted because the goal in an audit is to find opportunities to improve it. We love when we don't find anything, right? Like, whoo, yay, we didn't miss anything. But at the end of the day, we want to keep growing and expanding. So we really do want to look at that, kind of target that selection just a little bit. And some of the suggestions I typically give is want to narrow down that length of stay for those patients of great. I typically like to say greater than 3 days, less than 7. There's really no like golden reason for that other than it just helps narrow down that audit for the auditor. If you give those 20 some day stays, typically they're, hopefully all of the necessary documentation is taken care of in those days. And greater than 3 days, sometimes, they're in and out. There's not, those patients aren't as sick, right? Discharge within the last 90 days, final coded. I always like to do that because then if there is a huge opportunity, maybe we found that a surgery didn't get coded or, some MCCs didn't get coded, that it can still be resubmitted. I always think it's key that if patients outside the length of stay and they don't have a CC and MCC, why are they outside the length of stay? Was there an opportunity there? Also, just your troublesome DRGs for your team or for your hospital. If there's a highly denied DRG, take a look at that. Is there something that CDI can help on the forefront of before the patient is discharged? And then, so I did the other DRGs. I just some ones that it seems like CDI sometimes will struggle with. I put some DRG suggestions there to help target that. The pneumonias, if they're in the simple pneumonia, is there a chance for a complex pneumonia? Typically, you're not admitted to the hospital for a simple pneumonia. So looking for that. And then some of those more symptom type codes, DRGs, to see if you can move them out of those symptom DRGs. And then the question often we get asked is how many per CDS? And there's probably not any right or wrong answer for that. But I like to use the general rule of 20 to 25 records per CDS twice per year. And that just really gives a good ballpark of, gives you a volume. And I always like to use the word denominator because you want to be able to make sure you have enough in a record selection so that you can help your staff, your finding opportunity, but not just so little of an amount so that if you do find an opportunity, it kind of like, okay, I've reviewed 5 records and I found 3 opportunities. Then that might not make the CDS feel as well as opposed to, hey, I read 20 or did 20 and there's 17. And so it really is I think our next polling question, because I'm curious what you all think of how many per CDSs. And I do like, if you have the time and the finances, quarterly is ideal. That's really going to help to bring your CDSs to top notch. But sometimes we run out of time, right? So we can barely get that done once a year. So I am curious, in our next polling question, approximately how many record audits are performed on your CDI staff? And even if you're not being performed, how many do you think should be performed? If you don't mind spending just a minute, or we'll just spend 30 seconds or so on that, and then we'll share the results and see what everyone on the call thinks. Give everyone just a second, few more, and and we'll review the results together. Okay, great. So looks like 1 to 36, 30 had 39%, 37 to 60 records, 29%, and greater than 50, 15%, and 17% zero not auditing it. So the real interesting. It's probably really tough to get to that 50 records per year. So that 1 to 36 and 37 to 60 records per year really is the majority of us. So thank you very much for taking that time for our polling question. Um, so let's talk about communication. There seems to be a negative connotation with the word audits. When I say I got ice cream or I got audited, they definitely have two different reactions, right? For a while at UASI, I was really trying to change the verbiage to CDI audits to quality reviews because I really don't like the word audit because of that negative connotation. But however, it got confused thinking we were only reviewing for things like PSI and hacks. So I didn't want to get confused. So we keep it simple and we use the word audits. And if you do use another terminology and you're willing to share with me, I would love to hear that. Anyway, we know good communication is the key to success, and good communication does set the stage for a successful audit. Your staff will take your lead. So be honest about the audit. And one of our CDI supervisors, Allison Swinehart, calls audits a gift from leadership. And I like that. It just makes you happy. Like you're getting a gift to help advance your knowledge. They're investing in you. And so I am sure you all know many of these communication keys to success, but let's just run through them for reminders. Communication before the audit starts. Sharing at a meeting or awareness is always really nice, and just letting them know, okay, this is going to be happening. Share the why. You determined your why in your planning session, so share it with the staff on why you think an audit is a good idea. Get the staff excited. This is when, as leaders, sometimes we have to get out our pom poms and cheer on our team. I was never a cheerleader in high school, but at leaders, that's sometimes our role, right? We have to get people on board and let them know that they're going to get feedback, and this is going to help them improve and grow their knowledge and expertise. Talk about the timeline and ease concerns. It's human nature to worry we're going to get, hey, I don't want to get fired if I'm not performing, right? We worry when somebody's looking at our work. So let them know it's not a gotcha. It's for educational purposes. And it may be tricky if you are looking into performance issues, but I believe in being as transparent as possible and just say, the goal really is for learning. And then if there are some concerns with individuals regarding your performance, then we'll talk about that individually. And, our main goal is to help you improve. But then, sometimes not everyone gets CDI. It isn't for everyone. And then, of course, convey how the results will be used. Let them know you'll be planning to share group results and meet with them individually. And, you know, easing the concern again, nobody likes public shaming. So, let them know that that's not the process that you'll be using. And then one other quick tip with communication, it's important to provide clear communication to the team, but it's also really imperative that the auditors are clear on the objective as well. You don't want your auditor to review, hundreds of records on your people and then realize that they didn't evaluate the one thing you were looking for. So make sure it's communicated both to your team as well as the people that are going to be auditing. Analyze the results. You've invested that time and energy and resources to a CDI audit. It's time for you to analyze those results. For me, this is the fun part. I am odd in the fact that I really enjoy data and looking at trends, but I know that that's not everyone's jam or cup of tea. So we'll walk through some sample reports to get you to think about ways to look at reports. And when you're looking at your audit results, these are just some sometimes I need to have questions to kind of stir my brain up to think, okay, what should I be looking at? What are they telling me? And so we'll kind of go through some results and just what does that data show you? Are the results surprising? What are the trends and what are the opportunities? So I've included a bunch of different data. All the I've altered the results and stuff, so we're not sharing any clients' details. But these are some reports that we utilize and we share with our examples. But the numbers have been, changed up to represent fake clients, basically, or client scenarios. The first question I like to ask myself is when I'm looking at results or data, is what does the data show me? What are these results showing me? And so hopefully, perhaps your vendor, that you'll receive some overall findings for your team, or work with your auditors to say, hey, can you give me a summary? I just want to see a summary of my staff to see where that's going, where we stand. And so that you can also compare, um, you know, if there's improvements or not. So let's take a look at client A scenario on the left. At first glance, you'd say, well, this is a little concerning, right? If this is a well-established program, we don't really like seeing an additional 15% opportunity on cases already reviewed by CDI team. However, perhaps this is a new program or really new staff, or maybe a new process was previously put into place and you were just a program that was looking at DRG impact, but you expanded the program to review SOI or ROM. It is normal to find query opportunities in an audit. We've done thousands and thousands of audits, and we never have gone through an audit and saying, "Oh, there's no opportunities," because we are digging, we are looking, we are focusing because we want people to learn. There is always something to learn, and another quote I love is progress over perfection. There's no way to become 100% perfect in CDI because things change. Doctors are specialists, right? And especially, I see more and more clients that just go through work list. Where when I started in CDI, I had the oncology floor and I had the CCU. And so, I could become, pretty much an expert in those areas. But then if our surgery person was on PTO and we'd have to cover their floor, I was a fish out of water. So there it is. It's all about learning. In hindsight's 2020. The record is complete, and most often, we are targeting that selection criteria. And so if you get those findings, but if you saw these, if I saw these and I thought our program was doing good, and I got these, and this was client A, I would be in a little bit of a panic. But then the data is showing me like, oh, there's work to do. What are we going to do to solve this problem? And same way, so client B, if these were the same client, and let's say 6 months later we did another audit, and you say, you know what, this is awesome. We are really improving, and this would be after some great education, some process improvement, and the opportunity has been really reduced. So that's what really to kind of pause and ask yourself that question: what does the data show? Another question I like to ask myself is, are the results surprising? During an audit, we break it down. If basically when we look at queries that are placed, we look at, is there a query enhancement? Whether that's like an educational opportunity just to further strengthen that query. Maybe they put one clinical indicator, but maybe it would strengthen it if we put some additional clinical indicators in there. We look at query noncompliance, and we follow the HEMA guidelines for achieving a compliant query practice. And so we'll, call out some things. I don't really always love the word query non-compliance, but they're not following that standard practice. And then non-valid, meaning that they're not meaningful, that it was already documented well, and we just want to prevent any over querying. And so many times with leadership experience, we have instincts and we know their problems. And typically results don't shock us. But if something does, you want to uncover that information behind that summary. And so if you're reviewing, let's say your client C, and you've had these CDI query compliance findings. And so there were 606 queries that were reviewed in an audit by your team. If sometimes I know some of you are from smaller hospitals and organizations. This might seem like a huge number, but there's also, hospital systems that have, 30, 50 CDSs. And so this is more about a hospital system type of an example. But you had a 606 queries that we evaluated, and 250 of them were compliant. Query enhancement recommendations were 95, query non-compliance were 201, and query non-valid at 60. And if you were reviewing this, you might lose some sleep, right? We have a compliance problem and we need to address this from a team standpoint because it really seems like there is a huge need. If there's 201 non-compliant queries, I'd want to see what's making them non-compliant. What are they doing? What is the staff? And it might be as simple as, underlining and highlighting sometimes can be considered leading. So, maybe that's the issue. So that's a really, easy process thing. Stop doing that. But maybe there's more deeper issues in that. So, the results, they might be surprising in this area, but then the client D, much improved, right? You really only have more of a handful of those non-compliant. In this, I would take a look and see, what, is there an individual CDS problem? Is it just one or two CDSs doing this? And, does that surprise me? Sometimes it doesn't. We have those challenging people every once in a while. So then I would, there's no sense in preaching to the choir, right? Not to tell the whole team about this, but to talk to those individuals to look for those improvements. And likely you already know who those people are that maybe aren't following some of the guidelines that you'd set up as a leader. So are the results surprising? Next one is when analyzing your results, really look for patterns or trends. You've decided that you're going to do quarterly audits, which I really love because then you can see the trends and improvements of education. You don't have to wait for a whole year. You can kind of see as they're going. And so this one is a comparison of insufficient follow-ups. So you decided to include that in your audit in quarter one for the first time because you thought, I think that we have a follow-up problem. And you're right, right? There is 90 in client E that if this was your CDI team, you started to do some education and tried to do some understanding. Sometimes it's not the want to of the follow-up, it's just the time, and you had to hire up on your staff or those type of issues, or setting up guidelines so everyone followed, like you know maybe it's within 48 hours, or there's all different types of guidelines teams use for insufficient follow-up. Quarter three, hey, you really made those improvements, and so, but then quarter four, it kind of creep back up. So then sometimes we have to be reminded, a whole year has passed. And so you start the first year and, state about the reminders. So monitoring trends, I think, is really an important thing to be doing with your audits. Another one that we do is comparison of the non-compliant queries, because we really want to get those down. Like that really is a big issue for a leader, and we need to address that rather urgently. And so you saw that there was a problem in quarter one. You started doing education. By quarter four, you didn't have any, so you can give yourself a big pat on the back if these were your results. You're a good leader for addressing the problem, and it trended down. Yay. Love seeing trends like that, right? And that's what we'd like to see more of. So being able to trend your data, to be able to review different things from quarter to quarter, year to year, those are really nice things to be able to do. And the last question that I like to ask myself are, what are the opportunities? So anytime that you have results, I'll always asking, there's problems, you want to solve them. And in that clinical concepts, bucket, and for us, we like to break down query opportunities by topic. And query opportunities mean that when our auditors review the record, an additional query opportunity was found, and then we break that down by topic. And so you can see for client H, the scenario, the opportunity is very well diverse. So there really isn't one area that's huge, stuck out. So, we'd want to start with some general concepts of education, perhaps starting with the top 5, the CHF, the blood, the clinical validation, and encephalopathy, and renal. The other is in that 14%, which seems like a big bucket, but then that's like onesies, twosies. So they don't have their own bucket because it's, different. Maybe it was UTI or a CODI, or, one or two of those type of things. So that I think that, even if you are doing an internal process and you're on a spreadsheet and you're your auditors are doing, make sure they're documenting what opportunities they are so you can focus that education. Because most often it's not just one person or two people that don't understand a concept. And so you might as well be able to share that with your whole team, as well as then you can give some specific examples. You can kind of take out, you can, you know, de-identify everything so that you don't have PHI, or, you're not selling, publicly shaming any of your CDSs, but you can give that something in examples so everyone can learn. In client I scenario, you can see that there's a bigger piece of the pie. And so we'd really want to do some focused education on clinical validation. That's a tough topic, right? We don't always love writing clinical validation queries. Doctor, did you mean to write that? Those type of things. And it's an art to actually doing that. So, you'd really want to spend some time here and put the focused education on that topic, if that's, where your results were at. So just some questions to really think about when you're analyzing your data, to really break it down, to be able to utilize the data that people put effort in when you're doing those audits so that you can learn from that, and then be able to share that with your individuals and with the team. So that brings us to the next, provide feedback. That's the next key. So you've analyzed your data, you've asked yourself several questions to help you review the data. Now you're ready to give feedback, and feedback can be tricky. So I listed some keys to successful feedback. And if you struggle with feedback, I know I did earlier in my career as a leader, and it will be one of the topics that we'll discuss in our next December CDI management series, which is creating and maintaining the best CDI team. So if that interests you, be sure to sign up for that presentation. That'll be in the link tomorrow when we send out the PowerPoint for this presentation. None of these are rocket science, but they're good reminders for us as leaders when giving feedback, because no one really likes to be told that they have to improve. So being thoughtful and prepared can really help in that process. I would recommend sharing results in two settings. Give overall program feedback to your team group, get them all on a call, and then what are you going to do next steps? And then I would do individual feedback personally. Oftentimes, it's helpful to provide information for review prior to the meeting. And don't forget to celebrate the positive success. Sometimes we as leaders are like, oh, we got to improve this. We keep wanting to do all these improvements, which is great. But, celebrate those victories, celebrate those changes that your team is doing. Anticipate constructive feedback will be challenging, and just to kind of be prepared with facts. Consider the sandwich method. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but start with what they're doing well, provide areas of improvement, and then end the meeting with more positive feedback. I love reading leadership books and blogs on, how to become a better leader. And sometimes the sandwich approach is not always recommended. For some people who receive feedback, they'll only focus on the one thing you ask them to improve, and they won't hear the good things. Or oppositely, if you are wanting someone to improve, they may think, well, I'm not doing that bad. They told me all the good things I'm doing. I still think it's a preferred method. That's kind of how I like result or feedback is, okay, give me something positive, and I probably will get hung up on that negative thing, but it'll help me improve. So just realize that it doesn't work for everyone. You have to kind of take your own team, into account for that. Be prepared to give some specific examples. Be ready to show them, where you found the opportunity so they can review and learn as well. I like to ask for response and recommendations on how to help them improve. As adult learners, we all learn differently. I sometimes need to be, I have to hear things a couple times the older I get to be reminded. And so, talk to your person that's struggling maybe and that has opportunity, and how can you best help them. Expect defensiveness, remain calm. Sometimes these are best, key as a leader is for us to just stay calm and to keep the emotion out of it and stick to the facts and be clear on expectations. Sometimes these are best in writing so they don't get misunderstood, and we have to restate those action items and to remember to follow up, especially if we have action items that we want to make sure that are being implemented. Um, So I wanted to share with you some examples. I de-identified and kind of updated so we weren't sharing any client information, but how to give some CDI performance feedback examples. And I really like the format that we've done this for several clients where each staff member gets a report that they can, that then as leaders, you can discuss with them. And I liked that we start off by looking for ways to celebrate. So by stating their strengths versus fun, and it's encouraging for that staff member. And then give areas of opportunity. It's best when you give feedback, it's tangible, right? Like, okay, I really want to look at these query opportunities because, I've struggled with this in the past. And so anytime that comes up, you'll know exactly which area to focus on. And, when meeting with the staff, where it's either team approach or individual approach, I always like to reinforce to the CDI staff that is always something to learn in CDI. It's always changing. And sometimes it's frustrating because we can't be an expert on it all. And, the goal, it's not going to be perfection. And quite honestly, it will be very rare for that to happen in CDI. I know there's some, really, really smart people in our industry that do a phenomenal job. But for the majority of us, it's always looking for ways to improve and learning from audits so they can continue to grow as a CDS. So this is just kind of an example on how you can share results with your staff. And then there's a lot going on this slide, but trending results also can sometimes staff really appreciate that to see their improvement, and perhaps as their yearly review, you may sit down and with each employee and review. And this is a nice report that can be shared with staff individually so they can see their improvements, and as well as focus on what areas that they're struggling with. And the data is the same, the one on the left and the right just gives the bar graph. And if you're kind of looking at the bar graph, the quarter one is like the navy, the dark blue, and then quarter three is the orange. And this patient this CDS can really celebrate, right? Like their opportunities have really decreased, and that's pretty exciting. That's neat to see, and it's nice to see those trend lines. And so providing examples and reports like this for your CDI team can really help do that. And um, I like this report a lot, but sometimes staff members don't improve, right? And that's always hard. And maybe they're continuing to miss query opportunities, and you have to continue to provide them information. They still don't get it. And I've met so many beautiful, wonderful nurses that it's not for everyone. And I've had some wonderful bedside nurses that come to CI and they just didn't make it, and it doesn't make them bad. It's just not for everyone. So when you do have those conversations, and those are uncomfortable conversations, and it takes a lot of practice. And so if that topic does interest you, again, I think we're going to be, or I know we'll be talking about performance improvement plans during the December Lunch and Learn CDI management series. And then last example of individual metrics is a CDI scorecard example. Some clients like to do scorecards on their staff. I even like to do that sometimes for our internal CDI consultants. I can kind of be a little bit on the fence on these. I do love positive reinforcement, which involves adding a reward stimulus in order to increase that positive behavior, and incorporating an excellence reward system can do just that. It is exciting, and it's rewarding for those that are doing well. And this is just a simple example, you might want to incorporate for your team. We don't want audits to be punitive. We talk about that a lot, but we can reward those who are doing well. It gives the right people incentive to perform well. And you can take a look at what's important for your program. For this example, we believe that not missing queries is the area we want to focus on. So you can see we doubled the points there to make it higher weighted. And then, we wanted to make sure that valid queries and compliant queries were also important. And one of the main reasons I'm a bit on the fence about this is, as a leader, it can be very tricky. And to be honest, it's taken several years to land on something within our own internal team, because you do really have to be prepared and give rationale on your point system. You may love your Sally or your star employee. She shows up, she gets to work on time, she meets productivity, she's your go-to employee for special projects. But then in her scorecard, she missed some opportunities. And are you willing not to give her an excellence award? So I just warn you when you're setting up criteria to be prepared for that and think of all the different scenarios prior to implementing. Also, you can add things like DRG accuracy, SOI, ROM capture, productivity metrics. And I do love brainstorming and helping people. So if you do want to discuss setting up a CDI scorecard system, shoot me an email, and I'm happy to discuss, and we can work through that process for your team together. And now for our final key to a successful CDI audit, and that is educating your staff on the CDI audit findings, as well as providing education for the areas opportunities found in the audit. You've invested that time and energy, so don't miss this crucial step of providing ongoing education to your team. If many of you like me have probably come from a nursing background, and I don't know if you remember those skill days we would have, and all the resuscitated Annies we were out. At least that's what we called them in Iowa. I'm not sure what other one people call them, but the most experienced nurses would be watching you to make sure you did all the right techniques, started the IV right. We had our basic life support or ACLS classes where we'd renew every couple years to make sure our skills and knowledge were up to date. So don't forget to make education a priority for your CDI staff. Ongoing training really helps keep your employees happy and keeps them longer. And consistent investment in training lets your employees know that you're investing in them. And that improves morale and significantly impacts, excuse me, overall employee retention. And I get it. I've been there where you say, but we don't have a budget for that, or there's not enough time, to do that. I completely understand that. And sometimes we even think, well, don't they want to educate themselves? Should it be on them? But I think as leaders, we're always needing to look for ways to educate our staff. And if you don't have a budget, look for free education. There's all kinds of good stuff. Make sure it's good stuff. There's some not so great stuff out there, but look for free education that you can provide. And I love our UASI CDI leadership team composes a CDI scenario each month. And we have several clients that review these in their department meetings, and they found it really helpful. And remember, something is better than nothing. And anyone can submit to those CDI scenarios to us, and we'll work through them. So if you have like something that your team is, challenging each other on, and you want, some other people to take a look at that scenario, we're happy to do that. We're partnering with some hospitals across the country who, said, hey, we have a scenario for you. Can you take a look at that? So feel free to submit those to us as well. So you did it. We learned on how we are going to plan and prepare for the next audit. We'll communicate to our staff. We're going to spend time analyzing the results by asking ourselves several questions. We will provide feedback for both the group and individual. And lastly, but not least, we're going to give great education. And then we repeat, right? It keeps going on. I mean, it's not one and done. But back to my experience with audits in the beginning, when I was a first CDI, if you were able to join right at the top of the hour, you heard my scenario. And as much as I didn't enjoy that audit process we had, I did learn from it, and it made me a better CDS. And it helped me as a leader too, realizing what I didn't want to do as a leader and how I can improve that. But in our roles as leaders, we have many different hats to wear, but I feel like we have two main priorities, and that's to help our hospitals and organizations to be successful by capturing documentation that reflects that care and resources that were given to our patients. And the other one, and just as important, is to assist our staff to be the best they can be. And CDI audits assist with this. I hope this presentation will encourage you to take a look at your CDI audit process. And maybe after the presentation today, you may be thinking, hey, we're doing most of these things and we're off to a good start. Give yourself a pat on the back. It's not easy to coming up with a thorough process that works. And if you want to make some tweaks or changes, or you haven't done a CDI audit and you want to, hear more or talk more, I'd be happy to talk with you, and don't hesitate to reach out. I have, I'll put my email up there, and we'll do some questions here. I'll look at that in just a minute, but just because I know sometimes I have to drop before we get to the question part, I just want to thank you again for joining today. Just always appreciate that. And I hope you'll join us for the next CDI Management Series Lunch and Learn, Creating and Maintaining the Best CDI Team on December 9th. This will talk about hiring right, orientation, keeping your rock stars happy, dealing with squeaky wheels, and a performance improvement plan. Also, if your background is coding, we also are doing a lunch and learn in November with our about the E&M updates. And so that's on our website, or you can get an invite at if you email info@uasisolutions.com. And then last thing before I get to questions is after this presentation, you'll receive a survey, and we really do appreciate your topics for suggestions. I'm starting to prepare a list for topics for 2021, so that if there is a CDI management topic you would like to hear, please list that in the survey. I'm starting to hear a lot of questions about outpatient CDI, and we've done a lot of great work regarding that. So I'm going to start sharing some of that information. So I'm going to spend just a couple minutes of the rest of our time for the questions, and I'm not going to get to them all because it looks like there's quite a few of them. And so I will, if I haven't gotten to your email in this question time, then I will I'll get your response in the next day or two so that we can get those answers. So let's see, let me grab some of them. Um, so do you audit your auditors? That's a great question. We do. I recommend that. I think that that's a good quality assurance type thing. It's maybe not the exact same approach, but we want to make sure that our auditors aren't missing something. So we usually do a kind of a peer-to-peer thing like that, where like our supervisors will do, and a lot of times we do QA on a many of our audits just to make sure all of our auditors are following the same practices and having the similar findings from one case to the other. Um, okay, thank you for your questions. Um, Okay, and what is the turnaround time for UASI's audits? That's another great question. It really varies. We audit, do CDI audits on hospitals, whether they have one CDS or whether they have 60 CDSs. But what we do is we do a client kickoff call, and we talk about with the client, talking, with you as leaders, like what is your timeline? Sometimes like, hey, I have a budget and it has to be done by June 30th. So we work, on our way on how to get that completed in the time that you wanted. Sometimes we share ongoing results so that it can be a little bit more real time. So we really work with that. So it's hard to kind of give an exact answer on that at that same time, or to give an exact timeline, but we really work and partner with our clients to make sure that the results are in a timely manner. And it's hard to read and answer the questions at the and I love, thank you so many, several of you shared what you call it, so I want to just share that with everyone. We call them post discharge chart reviews. I like that. Somebody else says we call them quality assurance reviews rather than audits. I like that. I like that a lot. Um, I'm going to read through these. I will respond out. I do read. Oh, somebody calls them secondary reviews. So thank you. We're at the top of the hour. Many of you I know have meetings to go to next. Appreciate you joining. I'm going to let Sarah wrap us up, and I hope everyone. I'm not going to be on for Thanksgiving, so have a wonderful Thanksgiving. But we'll talk for us to join in our next CDI management series before Christmas. But Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, Stacy. I'm actually going to step in here. Sarah was having a bit of technical difficulties just getting reconnected to Zoom. So I'll go ahead and close this out. Thank you, Stacy, for answering those questions. Again, if Stacy didn't get to your questions, she will follow up via email in the next couple days. Your feedback is very important to us and helps us decide future topics. At the end of the presentation, a survey will appear in your browser window and in the chat. We would appreciate you taking the time to fill it out to improve future webinars. Additionally, tomorrow we will send a follow-up email with a certificate of attendance and a PDF version of the webinar. Feel free to download these for your use. Thank you everyone for attending today's Lunch and Learn, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.